Today's focus is on manufacturing. 12.5% of the people employed in Ohio work in manufacturing. But those 12.5% produce more than 16.5% of our state's gross product. It is the economic driver in Ohio. But the question is, how do we fill the jobs, which every week are getting increasingly skilled, require greater knowledge? Technology is simply driving manufacturing forward. We have two presidents today to address that question, and let me introduce both of them now, and then I think you're on first, right, Eric? So, the first, a longtime friend and a person I've worked with going back some 30 years when he became the president of the Ohio Manufacturers Association. Eric Burkland, for 30 years, has been the voice in Ohio encouraging policy to support manufacturing to help grow this state's economy. It is an enormous record, but never more important, as I think Eric would say, than today in meeting the needs we have in our state. Shawn Hendrix is the president of Nissan Chemtex, a Honda supplier. I'm going to take just a little time to tell his story because he is a man who created a career by asking a question. He graduated from college and looked around and decided that there were opportunities at a very young manufacturing company in Ohio called Honda. He was hired in as a production associate and assigned to the stamping department. He promptly volunteered to go on third shift, and not too long after that, had a meeting with his fellow third shift associates with the plant manager. It was an easy meeting because it was, ask the plant manager any question you want. He raised his hand and said, why don't we post job openings? You know, there are a lot of people in production who might be interested in jobs and would bring something to them, understanding what we do here in the plant. I think it took 2 weeks for the management was a little slow to grasp onto that question, but 2 weeks later, job openings started to be posted. 4 years later, he saw a job that interested him in purchasing. He applied for it, and he got it. Flash forward, as he gains experience in purchasing, roughly 15 years, he's now responsible for turning around suppliers. And there is a supplier in trouble. And those of you who might remember Shige Yoshida's speech about what you do, how you learn about a supplier, he went to the spot, he talked to the people, that's how he got to understand the supplier. And he came back recognizing that they had some miscommunication problems. It was a Japanese company with Japanese management, and there were the normal cultural understandings. He recommended that they should also have an American in the senior management group. Well, his recommendation was accepted, and he was asked, how do you like to be that American in the senior management group? It was inconvenient. It was a long drive for him. He took the job for 2 years, and at the end of 2 years, he was asked to stay for a third year, and he did. And he stayed on there, and today he is the president of Nissan Chemtex. There is an American in senior management now. But his job, what he is doing for manufacturing is far more than that. He has also helped form the Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership, and he spends a lot of his time doing his volunteer duties as president of that. And they are addressing directly the question of how to prepare people, how to get the skills we need in manufacturing. This is a driving issue for our state's economy, and I'm delighted to introduce two wonderful presidents to address it. Eric.
Thank you, Scott. What Scott didn't tell you is 30 years ago he was my chairman, right after I was hired at the OMA. And I also want to say Scott Brown's dad, Larry, who was nicknamed the Bear, was also my chair, I think 4 years after Scott. So it's like old home week here. So we've got some slides here. My role here is just to tee up Shawn. I'm going to tell you what we're doing at the OMA statewide, sort of our statewide strategies, and then give it to Shawn to talk about what's going on in Central Ohio. Has anybody ever heard the words industry sector partnerships? Could you raise your hand? So it's a fairly new concept, and that's what we're going to talk about here today. I don't know if I'm doing it wrong. Okay, here's our roadmap. So a little bit about industry sector partnerships. First about Ohio manufacturing. There's a lot of words here. Just let me paraphrase it this way. We're the third leading manufacturing state in the country after the much bigger Texas and California. With Indiana and Ohio, we're the most manufacturing dense economies in the state by far. We're about $110 billion of economic output in the state. Now, that's the equivalent of about 24 countries on Earth's total gross domestic output, right? So just the manufacturing output in Ohio exceeds all but a couple dozen countries on Earth. We are a behemoth. We are a huge manufacturing economy in the state. Scott mentioned this. The biggest constraint on our economy today is the availability of workforce. Our national association with Deloitte recently did a survey nationally, and it figures there's going to be about 2.5 to 3 million unfilled jobs in the country over the next 10 years. So that flows down to Ohio. It's a crisis. The demographic cliff is real. We don't have the people to fill it. And we need to train populations that we've never trained before to get into these jobs. And this is what we're going to talk about today. So industry sector partnerships. What we did 4 or 5 years ago. I'll tell a story on Shawn Hendrix. I think 5 years ago he called me and said, "What the heck are you doing in the workforce? We're dying out here. What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know what to do. I don't know what the right strategy is. We've tried this. It's not worked." Shawn wasn't the only person talking to me about what the heck are we doing. We went out into the field and did what manufacturers do. We benchmarked and say, okay, what out there is working? And we came across this concept. It's a systems level change strategy around industry sector partnerships. 5 years later, Shawn that called me on the phone is now the chairman and president of the local sector partnership here. He's a volunteer. Here's what the 4 dimensions of sector partnerships are. It could be any industry. For us, obviously, it's manufacturing. It could be financial services. It could be healthcare. It could be retail. It could be wholesale. It could be farming. It could be any industry. It's led by employers. So it's driven by employers, not by any other stakeholders in the system. It's focused on a single industry, as I said. And the importance of this is that there's some overlapping skills and competency requirements across industries, right? But each industry has its own unique sets of competencies required. And so it's really important to have that industry working on its technical requirements rather than just general requirements. It's regional for us. For comp, it's 11 counties in the state, and it's convened by a neutral intermediary. The key to an industry sector partnership, and Shawn's going to talk more about it, is trust, building trust across the system of recruiting and developing talent. Our leadership committee, Shawn's part of, this is the focus of what we've been doing around the state. We've been working to recruit manufacturing leaders all over the state and building capacity around industry sector partnerships. Policy, marketing and communications, and education innovation. There's something called Making Ohio here. And Stephen, when he was talking about the Science Festival, which is really awesome, the question is for us in manufacturing is how do we get more young people interested in their parents, particularly their moms, interested in manufacturing careers, because the image of manufacturing isn't the reality of manufacturing. So we've developed a brand called Making Ohio, done extensive research to try to understand how millennials, younger millennials and older millennials, like Casey, think about manufacturing. Second and third chance learners, how are they thinking about manufacturers? Second and third chance career seekers. And we built a brand called Making Ohio. We've done two test runs of this, one in the Mahoning Valley and one in Cuyahoga County. We haven't done it in Central Ohio yet, but keep your eye out for Making Ohio. So I want to talk about what an industry sector partnership is and give it to Shawn. So this is the system. I mentioned this is a systems level change. It's not a program. It's a way for a community to collaborate to achieve certain shared goals. So these are the stakeholders in the talent development system generally. Schools, community-based organizations, labor, human service organizations, economic developers, and of course the industry itself and manufacturers. Too many times what we've had is siloed programs going after certain goals, overlapping and uncoordinated. The key to an industry sector partnership is it's a community-based collaboration. The community sits down together and establishes shared goals and shared strategies and shared metrics to achieve those goals. Here's a picture at the state level. We have, as I mentioned, a leadership committee that coordinates the activities of all the regional industry sector partnerships. And we work with all these acronyms on the right. The Office of Workforce Transformation is led by the Lieutenant Governor John Husted and all these state agencies. So we have a coordination of on-the-ground regional sector partnerships across the state, coordinated through our leadership committee to the Office of Workforce Transformation and to the state agencies. Other industries are going to be doing the same thing. There was $5 million placed in the state budget by Governor DeWine to support industry sector partnerships. So in the next year, we're going to have a real growth in industry sector partnerships around the state. We've got most of the state covered by industry sector partnerships. They're listed over to the right here. We've endorsed 13 sector partnerships. There's a couple more about to develop in some of those gray areas of the state. Okay, I'm going to give it to Shawn now. As I mentioned while he's walking up, we've gone around the state for the last three and a half years recruiting manufacturing leaders to establish industry sector partnerships. There's a very strong sector partnership in Central Ohio. It's called the Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership. Shawn?
Thank you, Scott, for the introduction, and also Eric. As mentioned, again, my name is Shawn Hendrix. I'm the president of the Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership. I call it my second full-time job now. But these are some of the members of our partnership. We have Anheuser-Busch, ADS, Aerial Corp. You can see Honda's up there. My company is up there, Stanley Owens Corning, Worthington Industries. And then we have our educational members as well. And there are CTEC in Licking County, Eastland Fairfield, Tolles in Masson County, Pickaway Ross, Columbus State, OU, and The Ohio State University, One Columbus, and some of the chambers of commerce. And the interesting thing about this, obviously you're probably familiar with the companies like Anheuser-Busch, ADS, if you're over in that area, Aerial Corp, Honda, but then you look at some of the other companies such as GFS Chemicals. They're right over here on McKinley Avenue. They started business in Columbus in 1928. You have Midwest Molding, 100 people working there in Plain City. My company has 325, and Tool Technologies by Van Dyke. Steve Van Dyke is the treasurer of Comp. They're 13 employees. So when we talk about the skills gap and what's going on with manufacturing and education and so forth, as I always point out when I call on manufacturers, if a company the size of Honda or Anheuser-Busch or even Aerial Corporation can't solve this workforce issue, obviously a guy with 13, and I will say 13 highly skilled technicians at Tool Technologies or Midwest at 100, if these big companies can't solve the educational problem, the skills gap, certainly these small companies can't either. And that's really what kind of started my conversation, as Eric mentioned, with him 5 years ago. And I remember that phone call because I had met with a couple of professors from Ohio State, some other manufacturers, a very knowledgeable manufacturing person who was at Toll's, who has since passed away. And we went out to lunch and actually started talking about this. And after that lunch, I called Eric and said, man, we got a problem. So let me be clear, with the Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership, what we call COMP, there would be no COMP without Eric Burkland and the Ohio Manufacturers Association. You do not need to belong to the OMA to join COMP, but virtually most all of our members do. So back in August 2017, after my phone call a couple years later, we had a meeting. I was invited to a meeting by Eric to talk about the workforce downtown in his office. And in that discussion, a lot of the founding members that I listed up there were there, and we basically all were sitting around a table and talked. And the consensus was there's a lack of qualified job applicants for the manufacturing positions that are open in Central Ohio. It's nothing new, and it's not going away. And again, as I said, the large companies can't solve it. Obviously, a guy with 13 employees isn't going to be able to solve it. So we need to form a partnership to work together. And I remember telling the fellow executives there that day, not being Chicken Little and the sky is falling, but if we don't do something, as Eric mentioned, manufacturing is the largest economic engine here in Ohio. If we don't do something about the skills gap and training both high school students and adult learners, manufacturing is not sustainable in Central Ohio. It's not sustainable in Ohio. In fact, it's not really sustainable anywhere in the United States if we don't start doing something about that. So that was the impetus and the drive to form COMP. So our mission is to create a connected system to source manufacturers with qualified talent. And when I call on companies, when I talk about the qualified talent, I actually read something Friday, and it was very interesting to me, and the person that wrote this article was talking about the midsection. And that's what we're trying to address with COMP. And the midsection is you have your production associates, your unskilled associates, which we need, Honda needs, every company needs. And then you have your higher level of technical capability, which are basically your engineers with bachelor's degrees or master's degrees. But the need for manufacturing today is what we call this midsection, is what we call the technical hourly associates. These are men and women we call multi-craft maintenance. Most of the machines in my company cost between $1.5 to $2 million a piece. They have hydraulics, pneumatics, electrical systems, electronic systems. You need somebody to be able to make them run, because Honda doesn't shut down for their suppliers, so we need to be able to run 24 hours a day, and we need these skilled technicians. They're not out there. So COMP was incorporated on September 3rd of last year, and we are a 501c3 nonprofit. In this map here, as Eric mentioned, these are the 11 counties we serve and represent. There's 1,700 manufacturers and over 90,000 people employed in manufacturing in these 11 counties. These are the companies in red that are currently members, and you can see we're making a lot of progress in adding our membership through the Central Ohio portion. In April, we have our quarterly meeting up in Marion County, and we'll be trying to bring in new members from Logan, Marion, Morrow, and Knox County, and then later we'll be focusing more on Fairfield and Pickaway County. These are our non-manufacturing members. We have the various schools that I already mentioned before. I won't go through those. We have the OMA, and we also have various chambers of commerce. So what is the success of the manufacturing sector partnerships in Ohio, and what's going to define it? And what's going to define our success is how well COMP or any industry sector partnership is going to be able to, not to overuse the word, partner with our educators and our economic development people here in these 11 counties. Some of the things that have already been happening here in the last year, and Eric was a big driver of this, the scaling apprenticeships. So in July of 2019, the Ohio Manufacturing Workforce Partnership, which comprised the OMA, the industry sector partnerships like COMP, and the community colleges, received a $12 million grant from the U.S. Department of Labor to start working on this with scaled apprenticeships. If you're not familiar with apprenticeships, when you say apprenticeship, that's typically a 4-year program to become a tool and die maker or a journeyman in some type of skill. The scaled apprenticeships, what we're talking about is a much smaller snapshot of a 9 to 12 month certificate and an industry recognized credential. You know, you talk to somebody about becoming an apprentice and a journeyman, I'll go to college for 4 years instead of doing that. And then I'm not going to do either one of those because, you know, to an 18-year-old, that's 20% of their life so far. That's too long to look at. I can't think that far. But when we start talking about getting certifications in high school and the adult learners, again, I read something the other day where, you know, there's this big bulk of 24-year-olds that haven't found their way in life, and how do they provide for themselves? And, you know, one of the things on the Making Ohio website, how do we get them out of mom and dad's basement, boy or girl? This is what we're trying to do. So basically, with this grant, we're to develop 5,000 scaled apprenticeships in Ohio with this grant over a 4-year period. And COMP is responsible for more than 10% at 576 of them. These are the 12 regions. Again, as Eric mentioned, not all of them are covered by sector partnerships, but these are the 12 regions that we divided Ohio, or the OMA divided, and Lorain Community College divided Ohio up into to basically get our arms around this $12 million grant, excuse me, and 5,000 apprenticeships. So again, COMP's responsible for 576 of them, and Columbus State Community College is acting as COMP's fiscal agent for this and is the large coordinator of our activity. Another thing that's been accomplished is TechCred. I don't know if any of you are familiar with TechCred. There was some preliminary testimony originally. TechCred is a bill that was sponsored by Representatives Michelle Lepore Hagan, a Democrat out of Youngstown, and also John Cross, a Republican out of Kenton. And TechCred is for companies that are putting incumbent workers into technical training to get $2,000 of that money back per associate. Myself, Connexus NEO, and Amy Meyer of AMIP, which are all the manufacturing sector partnerships in Cincinnati, we provided testimony to try to get that bill passed, and it did. Another part of this, House Bill 2, in addition to the TechCred, which the TechCred really benefits the OT, not only the community college, but TechCred really benefits the Ohio Technical Centers and the Career Tech Centers and manufacturers like myself. The other thing House Bill 2 did is it provided the industry sector partnership grant, which is $100,000 to be able to start a new sector partnership. That's actually called the Spark Grant. We had our board of directors meeting last Thursday at Anheuser-Busch. Comp did, and we are going for the $250,000 accelerant grant, which we're going to be able to come up with $125,000. We're confident to be able to get the $250,000. What we're going to do with that $250,000 is basically work to develop educational programs at our OTCs, the Ohio Technical Centers and Career Tech Centers, and also to promote the work that is going on there and the educational opportunities that are going on there as well is what we intend to do with our money. You know, I know they have the bond issue going on right now, but other than the bond issue, you can usually turn on your TV and somewhere during the course of an evening, you'll see a Columbus State, Ohio State, or Ohio University ad on there. What you don't see is what is the training that's available for adults at Eastland Fairfield, Tolles, C-Tech, all these other different educational outlets that require much less time and training, and these citizens can go get this training and in 9 months or 12 months come out with a certificate that we'll hire for. And quite honestly, if you showed me through your own initiative that you went and got some education, got a certificate, guess what? If we hire you, I'm probably going to send you and pay you for some additional training myself. So, you know, if you think of Stephen Covey's 7 habits, and the 4th habit is win-win, right? What I like to think is win-win-win. And how do we spell this out? Well, the simple math of it is manufacturers plus educators plus students equals success. And some of the ways we support educators through COMP is we actively participate on business advisory councils. I think I'm on 3 of them myself. We speak to potential students. Was mentioned earlier, trying to get the moms involved in making those decisions, and hosting educational plant tours such as Manufacturing Day. Manufacturing Day is typically the first Friday in October. I believe my company had 4 of them last year, hosting over 140 students. And we had one last May with Westmore Middle School here on the west side of Columbus. Had about 45 8th graders. One thing I've learned through the comp process since I've been involved with it, and I know I'm an old guy, so this is kind of a paradigm shift for me, but parents and students are now starting to make their career decisions in 7th and 8th grade. I remember being a freshman at Ohio State trying to figure out what I was going to do, let alone 7th or 8th grade. I don't know what I was thinking, but it wasn't about my career. We provide internships and co-op opportunities, and I'm going to introduce Casey here in a minute. And we support existing programs with manufacturers and their incumbent workers. So here's what manufacturing success looks like in the comp region. In the upper left, we have at Toll's Career and Technical Center, Stanley Electric associates that are incumbent workers that are studying electrical component maintenance. At CTech, these, and you can't see probably in the picture, but these are all grown adults going back and studying the multi-craft maintenance. At Pickaway Ross are adult learners in welding. And here in the bottom right is Eastland Fairfield career and tech students, pre-engineering. These are high school students. The gentleman on the left, you may have seen in commercials a few years ago from Columbus State. He's working full-time at Honda as an Equipment Services Association associate. He completed their modern manufacturing program. Gentleman on the right is studying machining, again, an adult. And in this bottom picture, actually 2 of my associates. Probably 18 months ago, these were 2 unskilled associates. We decided to start developing our multi-craft maintenance associates through our unskilled incumbent workforce. Because what we found is there's such a demand for these technical hourly people that if you get one coming in off the street and they're applying for a job and they have these skills, there's probably a reason why they're on the street looking for a job, okay? We haven't had any success with that, so we are growing our own maintenance staff. Takes a long time, but we're committed to it. So the deal I made with these 2, we actually had 3 graduate, and we have 3 currently enrolled in this training at Toll's. It's 11 courses long. The deal I made with them was, I'm going to pay for your education. You got to do it on your own time. Because if somebody would came to me and said, Shawn, we're going to pay for your education at Ohio State, and you got to do it on your own time, sign me up for that. I didn't know how this would go over. But the other thing I told them, every 2 courses you complete, you get a raise. So by the time these 2 gentlemen, now 3, have completed this training, in about 18 months, they increase their pay by 50%. That's pretty significant when you have a family. I want to introduce Casey Carner here real quick. I was going to have Casey be my guest, but Scott said, no, she can't be your guest because she's going to be my guest. So when Scott came out to meet with me, I said, you know, if you got time, I want to take you out in the plant and I want to introduce you to somebody very special. And I introduced him to Casey. So I mentioned Manufacturing Day. So Casey came to my company with her fellow Toll's students. She was at the Toll's Career and Tech School studying in Ramtech, correct? Robotics and Advanced Manufacturing. She came just Manufacturing Day in October 2016. I think it was right after Thanksgiving that year. I got a call from Casey. He said, hey, you know, I met you. I asked for your card. I'd like to come shadow one of your engineers. I said, okay, that was first week of December that year. Then in February, Casey's persistent. She asked for a co-op in high school, senior in high school. I'd like to do a co-op. So she did a co-op, then you did a capstone project, right? As a senior in high school. So then Casey went to Cleveland State University for her first year of college. She and her family live in Madison County, where London is. She came back, and through some trial and error, we got together and I offered her an internship for the summer of 2018 which she accepted. That was going to be a summer internship. But Casey was outstanding in her work. Casey realized when you took a job that means you also show up for work on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. So she had those skills going for her. But she's really smart, has excellent soft side skills. So then when she was ready to start her second year, which would have been at Columbus State, I offered her a internship that she could work whenever she had time to work. Because I knew she was special and I wanted to keep in touch with her. So she had that until she completed her associate's degree in electromechanical engineering. Casey graduated with her associate's degree on this past December 13th, 2019 on a Friday. Casey started her full-time engineering job with us on Monday, December 16th. Okay? So my point to all of this is that these technical skills can be learned. And doesn't matter what age, what race, what ethnicity, whatever, these can be learned skills. And Casey's a shining example of this. So how we're going to replicate our success in 20 and 21 is to continue to grow our membership. When I went to ADS, which is next door to me in London, Ohio, Dan Must, who's the, I think, regional vice president of manufacturing for ADS, was in between plant managers, so I went and met with him. And I'm going through a very similar presentation. And about halfway through the presentation, and my motto is always, why say a few words when a few hundred will do? So it's a long presentation. So anyway, I'm going through my presentation, and Dan says, stop. I thought, wow. I was thinking to myself, I thought I'm a better salesman than this. And he goes, stop. He goes, we're joining. He goes, everything you're talking about, these workforce issues, the lack of skilled people, I have several plants under me, and I'm dying in every one of my plants because I can't find these people. So, still growing our membership. We're still working with our K through 12 educators, and we're also working to identify any training gaps. We talk about future jobs and what jobs that are going to be out there tomorrow that we don't even know today. And that's something that COMP is also going to have to continue to work on with our educators, is identifying, hey, this you may have heard, may not have heard, Industry 4.0. What's that mean? It really means it's the fourth industrial revolution, where machines are talking to other machines and data centers and so forth, and it's going to take a lot of high tech to be able to pull that off. So I mentioned to Scott Whitlock on Friday, this past Friday, I had a 3.5 hour long meeting with Columbus City Schools, Celeste Lewis. She's been there 6 weeks now. She's the new director of Career and Tech Ed. And I showed Celeste this slide, and it's very concerning to me. Because when we look at COMP's region, I know this may be hard to see, but in these green boxes are basically the counties that have 10% or greater manufacturing population. And when you look at my county, Madison, we're at 18.4% of the population works in manufacturing. Union County, 20%. Logan County, 20.4%. Marion County, where I lived for 33 years, is at 20%. Morrow County, Knox County. But when we look at Franklin County, and this is from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, Franklin County only has 4% of the population employed in manufacturing. The thing that was really shocking to me, when I talked to Celeste, Columbus City Schools really don't have the manufacturing training that we're looking for as manufacturers. What's hurtful to me, that's the largest school district in Ohio. We have tolls out here, we have tolls out here in Madison County, completely blew it. We have tolls here in Madison County, has Ramtech. Last week I was up in Marion at Tri-Rivers in Marion County. Tri-Rivers has the first Ramtech. Unbelievable. The resources and the equipment they have there is just unbelievable as a manufacturer looking at that. So what Celeste and I talked about is I'm hoping that the Columbus City schools see this need and start putting a plan together to develop manufacturing-based training, because there's jobs available. And what I'd like to see, you know, what I talked to Celeste about, you know, I don't care what anybody says. There's very good students in the Columbus City schools. I graduated from the Columbus City schools a couple years ago. But there's very good students there. And what I think there's an opportunity, you know, not every Columbus City school student lives in poverty, but let's be honest, there are a lot are. And I think this is one way to break this cycle of poverty in Columbus, is being able to provide this type of manufacturing technical training to juniors and seniors in high school, and have the resources in Columbus for these 24-year-olds or these 20-year-olds in Columbus that can't find their way, can't afford to go to college. Even if they can't afford, maybe they can't go because they're taking care of a family member, whatever. These 9-month, 12-month certifications are a real pathway for our fellow citizens to enhance and increase their job satisfaction and also their livelihoods. Lastly, I'd like to show a video that Casey and I were asked. Casey, you want to stand up and say hi to everybody? So Casey and I were asked, they're involved with tolls, and Casey and I were asked to participate in a video. And this is one of the things that COMP can do to help support, get the word out about manufacturing and manufacturing careers. My name is Shawn Hendrix. I'm the president of Nissan Chemitech America. I'm also the president of the Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership. The purpose of the Central Ohio Manufacturing Partnership is to work with educators and also certain agencies within the state government to develop a pipeline of trained workers for manufacturing both now and well into the future.
My name is Casey Carner, and I'm currently a lean engineer at Nissan Chemitech America. I learned about Nissan through Toll's Career Technical Center. The students at Toll's are learning the hands-on experience, and the teachers and the programs are focused around the students and making sure that they have the skills that they need.
I know when they come in our door that they have some of the basic skills that they need. We need to be working with the schools and get that message out of the need for students that are technically trained in manufacturing.
Tolls really helped me get experience for businesses that I would have otherwise not known about. The skills that I've learned at Nissan will definitely help me in the future.
Having tolls in our backyard is so important to the sustainability of Nissan Chemitech America, but also it's important for the state of Ohio to have these technical centers. So all the technology that you saw there, the building and everything, that's my company in London, Ohio. So again, you drive by a manufacturer, don't really know what's behind the walls. Virtually every manufacturer today has high technology and requires the people to maintain and also sustain it, and we can't find them. If there's any manufacturers in the room who don't belong to COMP but would like to, I'd certainly like to hear from you. And COMP, very similar to Rotary. I know we're having a beautiful meeting today as we do at COMP, maybe not this beautiful because we're manufacturers, but when I call on educators, when I call on manufacturers, the thing I stress to them is we are a boots on the ground organization. We got a lot of work to do, and just going to meetings isn't going to get it done. So we got to get in the trenches with our educators and our citizens and some of the government agencies that Eric listed up there earlier and get this work done. I'd like to thank all of you for your time. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, sir. Thank you.
I have a question about it. You've talked a lot about training as one of the barriers to getting the skilled workers that you need. Have you also looked at the other barriers that I could see, which might be affordable housing, or better yet, transportation? We're dealing with programs with the Columbus Public Schools out of this club, and we've discovered that a number of them can't think beyond the bus system. they don't have a car, they couldn't get up to the Honda lane if they wanted to.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is something I've discussed with our Madison County Chamber of Commerce as far as affordable housing. And that's why I said there's great students in Columbus. And yesterday, I forget what show it was, with Colleen Marshall on Channel 4, and there's about 5 or 6 students at Walnut Ridge High School working with somebody trying to get CODA or a levy to pass to be able to have free busing on CODA for students to get where they need to get. There's another thing out there that I would like for us to be able to work on, expand on, and Eric introduced me to it, called Empower Bus. And Empower Bus is a fairly new company that provides vans for people to, get out and exactly do that. And companies can share in the cost of the van ride, example from Columbus to Honda or Columbus to Madison County. Empower Bus is something that I think is an opportunity for something that needs to be scaled much larger than what it is. I grew up in Columbus and went to Columbus City Schools. And growing up in Columbus, I grew up in the far north end. And I was coming home from water skiing one day when I was in college and passed the Honda plant. And I asked one of my buddies, what is that? And he said, it's the Honda motorcycle plant. They didn't have the auto plant there yet. And I said, wow, not knowing I'd go work there for 23 years. But growing up, to your point, growing up in Columbus, Marysville was like Pluto to me. I thought it was the other side of the world. And, it's 30 minutes away. So yeah, I think looking at Empower Bus and trying to get some other community leaders involved, you bring up a good point, especially from the busing and transportation. And the old saying, you don't know what you don't know. Every one of us is going to go out and get in our car and leave. What we don't know is there are people that in this community, in the city, even in Madison County, they don't have a car. They can't afford a car. And they can't even afford CODA bus. I didn't know till I watched the show yesterday that CODA, I think, is like $450 a day. To us, yeah, that seems reasonable. If you don't have anything, it's prohibitive. And to your point, yes, there is a lot of work that needs to be done on that.
Wait up here a second. Okay. So I'm going to interrupt him here. I'm going to ask him to stay a little bit because I'm sure there's a lot more questions, but we have reached 1 o'clock, so I want to thank everybody for coming. With that, obviously, some of you I know have to get back to work. I'm going to go ahead and ask Shawn to stick around and even over the microphone if you want to take a few more questions. But thank you all for coming today. I'm going to skip the bell.